Next on Closer to Truth.
A concept like zombie is a creative game that we play with our everyday notions of people. It's the body without the mind.
Zombie is a set of sensory motor systems that can do very complicated behaviors in the absence of consciousness.
Consciousness is like the wind, but you don't see it. What you see are the effects of it.
Proto-consciousness, something from which consciousness is derived, is fundamental and irreducible. It's something like spin or charge.
You want to talk more about zombies, or are you done with it? According to some people, consciousness is the hard part of that problem.
Why do we call consciousness a hard problem?
I think we have to be careful not to toss this term around too readily, as though somehow it's a given that there is such an entity as consciousness just because we have that word and we use it. It could be, as other people have pointed out, that they're just like we have the word aliveness, okay? We have a concept. Doesn't mean that there is a single thing called consciousness. There may be many processes, many ways that we engage with the world, with our own sensations and with the sensations that we get from the outside world. But to say that that means there's some overarching entity may be a mistake.
I think we have a semantic problem here. Consciousness is used incorrectly, well, incorrectly or not, to group consciousness, so all kinds of things. But I have to disagree with what you said, Leslie, because I think that consciousness, when used properly or in a restricted sense, is something very specific. It's experience, it's awareness that biological systems have, and only biological systems have, as far as we know.
So far.
So far. And it's just a matter of figuring out exactly what it is. I think we got to be careful of sort of postmodern deconstruction of the term consciousness.
If we're going to find a scientific explanation for something, we have to try to be a little bit restrictive about what we're trying to explain. Because if we try to explain all of those things that all of the different people mean in all of the different ways they use the word consciousness, we're not going to be able to do that. You've got to have kind of focus down on what we're after, which is closer to the idea of qualia.
I'd agree with that. Sensations are qualia, our experience, contribute to our inner life that distinguish us from computers, as far as we know, who don't have consciousness, who don't have sensations, flavors, emotions, feelings, what philosophers call qualia.
And Joe has just said what's important is to find one aspect of it to work on. For example, some people like, for example, Christoph and Francis Crick have said, let's look at visual awareness as sort of a paradigmatic case and start with that feature and see if we can find the neural correlates of consciousness beginning with one aspect of consciousness. My question would still be, is that going to generalize in some way, or are all we're going to find is the neural correlates of visual awareness in a specific experimental setting?
The hope is, but it's a hope, it's an experimental program right now. You uncover any one aspect of consciousness, sensory consciousness, visual consciousness, pain, self-consciousness, whatever, that the other aspects of consciousness are probably closely related in kind. The same program was in effect when people tried to study heredity and in the origin of life, and the belief was that studying that aspect of heredity and how the genetic information is transmitted in this very simple case probably will illuminate the way humans pass on genetic information to their children. We don't know.
One of the theories would be that each of the different aspects of consciousness, the visual, the auditory, all the things are each separate systems that somehow get integrated together and gives an illusion, like what we say an epiphenomenon, something that it's not real, but it seems like it's real because we have all these things working together, all these different facets of consciousness.
Well, I have a big difference with you. I don't think that this integrating all this stuff together is what's crucial about consciousness.
What's important? In your view, what's important?
What's important about consciousness is the experience of it.
When you have toothache, when you have tooth pain, it might override everything else, right? Because it can be so bad, it hurts so bad. Why does it hurt? I mean, why is it that the release of some ions sloshing on your brain, some calcium and potassium ions that move around your brain give rise to this really bad feeling? And
that's the hard problem.
That is the heart of the hard problem. Right. So in that case, there's very little information integration going on. It's all that one tooth that hurts. So it doesn't have to be, I agree with Joe, it doesn't have to be the integration. It's just the sensation. How can a physical system, how can any physical system, a human, a fly, a robot, how can a physical system have subjective states?
Now you talk about some things that we do, a lot of things that we do that we're not conscious of, and we use the term zombies in consciousness studies.
No, wait a minute. No, wait just a sec.
What is zombie, Christoph?
Okay, zombie, I mean, it's used in different connections. Francis Crick and I define zombie as a set of sensory motor systems that can do very complicated behaviors in the absence of consciousness. So, for example, when I talk to you and I do this, turns out that's a very complicated movement. We have, it's difficult to get a robot to carefully grasp this, to judge how far it is away, to judge the distance to my mouth, to tilt it just the right distance. That's a really difficult problem in robotics. Yet I do it all the time effortlessly. Now there's some patients that, for example, are unable to see this glass, or they don't see this how big it is. They can't see is it here or here. Yet if you ask them just to grab it and drink it, they can do that. So here you have a beautiful dissociation. You have part of their visual system that mediates this zombie behavior that's intact. Yet the other part of the system that mediates the conscious sensation that they can actually see this glass of water that is destroyed due to, in this case,
so
to a
they
lesion.
can't see the glass if you ask them, do you see a glass?
Correct. They cannot see it, yet they can still do certain highly trained behaviors, like taking it and drinking from it.
So the point is that the zombie is not conscious of that. The zombie part of the brain is not conscious, but is still able to do what look like sophisticated things.
That's correct. And there's a whole range of these systems inactive that move your eyes, that adjust your gait, that, when you shake somebody's head, when you climb, when you drive.
Let me just say one thing. You got to understand that using the word zombie this way, right, is a marketing ploy.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. A concept like zombie is a creative game that we play with our everyday notions of people. It's the body without the mind. It does all the things that bodies do without the subjective locus of experience. But that person concept is fundamental, and each of us has it. For example, when I look at what's on this table, I believe that I am having my experience. I don't think I'm having Christoph's experience. That's part of my concept of myself.
Does the concept of zombie help us understand consciousness?
Yes, because if you look at the brain basis of this, so if you can identify what part of the brain or what brain systems are responsible for mediating unconscious behavior, zombie behavior, call it whatever you like, what part of the brain is responsible for mediating unconscious behavior, and compare that with part of the brain that's responsible for mediating consciousness. And let's look in your brain or in an animal brain when the animal does a conscious action, when it does unconscious action. Where's the difference? Is there a special type of neuron involved? Does a neuron behave in a particular way? Does it look different? Those questions we can ask.
Different systems involved.
Exactly.
Again, that's assuming that all conscious and unconscious acts, as though that they're two kind of separate categories, that there's a category of conscious acts. It may be that visual awareness, being awake as opposed to asleep, being in a light state of anesthesia as opposed to being fully awake, feeling toothache pain, these may not be unified in any overarching
biology has
way.
shown, the history of biology in the last 150 years has shown that there for every specific function that you can identify, there's always one or more specific gadgets, specific molecules, specific molecular machinery, specific neurons, specific cell that carry out this function. That's just, that's how biology works.
So for each of these forms of engaging with the world, visual awareness or being awake or being attentive may have their own specific systems. It's not to say that they don't have systems, and each of these could be elucidated. The question is there some overarching system that we're going to find?
My answer to that is you betcha there is. But let me come back to, are you really interested? That's my answer. We can talk about it some more. But what about, you want to talk more about zombies, or are you done with that?
Well, I think we're pretty much done with zombies.
Can I say one thing?
So you certainly have not made it clear for an ordinary audience about zombies. You got the Hollywood zombie, you got the Haitian zombie, you got the philosopher zombie, and you got Christoph's zombie.
I like Christoph's the best.
Well, Christoph's is very different from all of the rest.
Right.
So when he uses the word, he's going to stir up in people thoughts which are not relevant to what he's talking about. And that's,
that's a good point.
That's the problem.
That is a good point.
That's the
Am I being
problem.
deconstructed?
I just want to say that
It's nice he's still alive. Go
we
ahead,
have to be
Stuart.
careful about not confusing attention with consciousness, because it could be that our sensory inputs give us kind of this slate that is really not conscious until other systems like the cholinergic system come along and select for attention, for conscious attention, particular subsets of that wide screen.
Stuart, I have to ask you, you at this table literally have your hands on consciousness. You're in the operating room, you see it go down, you see it effectively disappear,
Right.
and then you bring it back.
Right. Yeah.
What can you tell us?
Well, it's an amazing thing. Even though I do it daily, I still wonder, where my patients go. But then it makes me wonder, why are they conscious in the first place?
Right.
And of course, I'm very happy to have them come back every day. But
I hope you also think about the
I
mix
should
of
hope.
gases at that time.
well, of course, yeah, of course.
Okay,
and in
good.
fact, it's interesting because the gases that go from the circuit into the lungs, into the blood, into the brain, don't form any chemical bonds at all. They actually form very weak quantum mechanical forces, and that's all they do.
Well, no, that's not quite true. There are some that go to very specific
We're talking about the
receptors.
gases. We're talking about the gases.
But some of them go to very specific receptors, right?
And they form quantum mechanical forces only. They don't form any chemical bonds whatsoever. They don't form any ionic bonds, strictly quantum mechanical, which implies that what they are interfering with, what they are erasing, consciousness, involves quantum mechanical interactions.
It wouldn't have to do that. It would it could just be creating something at one level which affects something at another level and has nothing to do with quantum mechanics.
Well, I disagree with that because
I'm saying I'm not saying that what I said is correct. I'm saying what you said doesn't necessarily follow.
well, I think it does, Robert, because I think
You have to be
means
careful
how
not
it
to say
works.
that if nobody knows, it must be quantum mechanical, because they're both black boxes. They must go together.
Well, that's true, the confluence of mystery theory. But what I'm saying is proteins changing their shape depend on quantum mechanical forces in these pockets inside the proteins. Anesthetics get in there, form their own quantum mechanical
Suppose that's
interactions,
true.
and prevent the protein from working.
Yeah, suppose that's
Suppose
true.
that's
So
true.
what? What follows?
It implies that there's a quantum coherent state among these proteins throughout given nerves and given systems.
I'm sorry, that's not true.
particularly,
That's not
But you
particularly
could do that. You could say that of the liver, couldn't you?
no.
Why not?
Liver function is not inhibited by anesthetics.
Oh, all right. Okay, that's a good answer.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the social brain, because we as individuals define ourselves as all, as you said, we only know what we know. I don't know what you're thinking. So what is it about the social relationship among people that helps define who we are?
I think you can think of it like language. Language is a system that's outside of us, essentially, but we all participate in it, and our brains seem to be well adapted to do it. And I think that's the same thing with this social system that I'm talking about, the person system. I am a person with a mind, you're a person with a mind, and our brains are well adapted to essentially perceive both ourselves and other people as persons, that is, bodies with minds. In a sense, what gives us the feeling of the unity is that each of us has, and I will call it an illusion, that there is a source of perception, feeling, awareness that resides in us.
The eye.
Pardon?
The I,
That's
capital
the
I,
I.
with
The I.
Or the
Well,
self.
and that doesn't mean that we have to be self-consciously reflecting on the self. That's something else. But the sense that my experience somehow emanates from me or belongs to me, and I believe that Robert has experience, Christoph, each other person here has experience. I believe that that's an illusion, if you like, and that we participate in that, in a sense, in the same way that we do in language.